Medications are not going to teach you better coping styles. They're not going to teach you how to better think your way through situations. It's certainly not going to change the quality of your thinking. It's not going to build you a support network. There are things that medications simply cannot do. It's not either or. What about medications and psychotherapy and self-help? That's certainly what I'm encouraging. All right, let's look at this now from the social side of the equation. The World Health Organization is the international watchdog that monitors these issues around the world. What they described was how depression is so prevalent currently, the fourth greatest cause of suffering and disability, and it's rising, so that by the year 2020 it will have risen to become the second greatest cause of suffering and disability. Australia is suffering higher levels of depression year by year. Depression is striking younger and younger people in Australia year by year. That's true in Australia, it's true in the United States, it's true around the world. What I've been interested in then is, skip through that, this is the book cover of a new book that will be coming out in September, where I've been tracking what's called epidemiology. Why is depression spreading so quickly around the world? Is this about biology? Is this about emotional contagions? And when I say that depression is contagious, if you think about it, you already know this. Mood spreads. There are people who can walk into a room and they instantly spread rainbows and sunshine, and inside of 5 minutes everybody is holding hands and singing Kumbaya. And then there are other people that walk into a room and instantly suck the energy right out of it and turn it into a black hole, usually your relatives. So the fact that mood spreads is hardly a novel observation. But what I've been particularly interested in is how does depression spread from one person to another, and where does it spread? And the family in particular is the most fertile ground. That when we look at what are called the transgenerational risk factors, why depressed parents have such highly elevated risky kids. The child of a depressed parent is anywhere from 3 to 6 times more likely to suffer depression than the child of a non-depressed parent. And as you now have learned, it's not because there's a depression gene. There isn't a depression gene. There are combinations of genes that respond to environmental conditions that predispose people to depression. So this process of socialization is how we learn the patterns that we learn for responding to the challenges of life. And so what psychotherapy addresses is the skill-based issue, that if you are not adequately prepared to deal with the fact that life keeps changing. Look at how much life has changed in the last 5 years, how much has changed in the last 10 years, the last 15 years. You know, anybody in here who doesn't surf the web, who doesn't have an email address, 15 years ago, I mean, just to put it in perspective from an American's point of view, 1992, when President Bill Clinton took office, there were 5 websites. When he left office, there were 50 million websites. How quickly things change in terms of the way technology changes our life. But technology is not value-free. And people start to learn that technology matters more than human relationships. Why people's relationships are suffering so dramatically. Why people want things so quickly. But it's the skills they're not learning that place them at risk. So what good psychotherapy teaches are specific skills. It's not just sitting around and talking about your feelings. What a good therapist is going to do is really structure treatment to teach you the skills you need to help you manage the things you're facing in your particular life. So greater self-awareness so you can make better choices. Being able to use information. When I talk about reality testing, what I mean is, the simplest way I can say it, depressed people think things and then make the mistake of believing themselves. Thinking is dangerous if you are vulnerable to depression. But depressed people, when they're thinking things, they don't realize they're making errors in information processing. They think this is really the way it is. So the ability to use information, to go outside yourself, is a critically important skill, why I'm talking about it. Building and keeping good relationships going with other people, the social skills that help insulate you. The people who do better are connected to other people. The people who do worse are more socially isolated. Skills in coping with life's inevitable adversities. I mean, here's the reality of life. Everything represents potential hazards. If you have health, you run the risk of losing it. If you have a job, you run the risk of losing it. Adversities are not going to be escaped by anybody. Nobody gets out of here alive. The people we love die. The pets we care for get hit by cars. Our kids get their faces tattooed and they put in nose rings. There are all kinds of ridiculous things that happen in life that challenge us. And the people who are better able to meet these challenges do better. They're less vulnerable to depression. And that includes being able to make good skills in decision making and even learning to think preventively. Well, part of what we've learned then is that it isn't what happens to you, it's how you deal with what happens to you. It's how you think about these things. And just to give you a very quick tour of 3 major factors. There are many factors, but many of the most important things about depression happen in these domains. How you cope with stress and adversity. Attributional style means how you interpret events that happen. So for example, I call you up, you're not home, I leave a message for you, hey, call me back, you don't call me back. How do I interpret that? If I interpret it as, gee, you must have been busy and that's why you didn't call me back, it's not going to hurt me. If I say the reason you didn't call me back must be because you don't like me anymore, that hurts. Depressed people interpret things in ways that injure them. They actually believe these interpretations, but those are what are called attributions. And the last is cognitive style, how you think about things. Now, I'm not going to have time to talk about all these things in detail, but let me at least give you a couple quick points. How you think about things. Men are just immature and pleasure-seeking versus what? Mature and seeking misery? People who are prone to depression think that there's something really valuable about being deep and exploring the deepest issues of life. Well, some people can do that. Some people sink into the depth. There is, in fact, a danger in thinking too much. There is a phenomenon that is called rumination. Rumination is a style of coping where the person thinks and analyzes and thinks and analyzes at the expense of taking effective action. So they focus on their feelings, and they talk about their feelings, and they explore their feelings, and they write about their feelings, and they have feelings about their feelings, and then they want to know why they feel so bad. It looks like this. She says, I'm a typical Jungian archetype demonstrating a variation of the Apollo-Daphne complex with repressed delusions. He says, I'm just a guy from Omaha. And if we ask the question, who is at higher risk for depression, she is by far. It sounds counterintuitive, I know, but the evidence is overwhelming. There is a danger in thinking too much. Socrates said the unexamined life isn't worth living, and I will add to that, neither is the over-examined life. This is again called rumination. And what we have discovered through the research is that the people who are most prone to rumination have the highest level of depression symptoms and the highest level of anxiety symptoms, and they experience the greatest degree of self-doubt, chronically second-guessing themselves to the point of being absolutely indecisive. It's what's commonly referred to as the analysis paralysis. There's a danger in thinking too much. The idea is to take action. Now here's what's interesting about